Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The water ran steady from the tap, the sound soft and rhythmic as it splashed against the sink. Steam curled up in faint tendrils, fogging the window slightly. I was lost in thought, the late afternoon sun slipping through the blinds and painting thin golden stripes across the kitchen counter and my bare shoulders. The air was warm, still, until I felt it, a sudden pair of hands, firm yet hesitant, sliding around my waist from behind. I froze, the plate in my hand nearly slipping. My breath caught, heart stuttering in my chest. His touch wasn't rough, it was careful, like he was testing a boundary, unsure if he'd already crossed it. My skin tingled where his palms rested, a silent storm building in that fragile moment. I turned slightly, just enough for our eyes to meet over my shoulder. His face was so close I could feel his breath against my neck, steady, but charged. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us carried more weight than words ever could. "Careful," I whispered, my voice trembling more than I intended. "You almost scared me." He didn't move away. The faintest hint of a smile tugged at his lips, his gaze tracing mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. The scent of dish soap and warm water mixed with something deeper, something that wasn't supposed to be there, but was impossible to ignore. For a heartbeat, everything blurred, the sound of the running tap, the fading daylight, even the world outside that kitchen. There was only that closeness, that quiet charge between two people who knew they shouldn't linger in it, yet didn't pull apart. Then his fingers moved, just slightly, enough to make me draw in a sharp breath. I turned off the tap, the silence that followed almost deafening. My reflection in the glass was faint, but I could see both of us there, his hands still at my waist, my pulse still racing. "What are you doing?" I asked softly, not trusting my own tone, half warning, half something else entirely. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, and in that single, stolen glance, everything changed. The moment broke with a sound, a soft thud from the hallway, footsteps approaching. I stepped away quickly, heart hammering, knowing whatever that was between us, wasn't over yet. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. After that day in the kitchen, something between us changed, quietly, dangerously, like a thread pulled from a sweater that no one noticed until it was too late. We didn't talk about it. We acted as if it hadn't happened. But every shared glance, every accidental touch carried a charge I couldn't ignore. It began long before that moment, though, before the dishwater and the sunlight and the touch that made my heart stumble. Ever since his father left on long business trips, the house had grown quieter. Empty spaces seemed louder, echoes lingered longer. I tried to fill them with music, chores, and pretending everything was normal. But he noticed. He always did. He'd grown from that shy boy who barely spoke into a man who saw more than I wanted him to. There were times he'd help with dinner, standing close enough for our arms to brush. Sometimes he'd hand me a cup of coffee in the morning, his fingers grazing mine just a little too long. And though I told myself it meant nothing, my heartbeat always betrayed me. There was loneliness in this house. Not just mine, his too. He carried it in his eyes, in the way he stayed up late, staring at the dark screen of the TV long after the movie ended. I'd see him sometimes, half asleep on the couch, a quiet vulnerability softening his face. I never meant to blur the lines. But emotions have their own gravity, pulling two souls together even when they shouldn't touch. One night, while setting the table, our hands brushed again. I looked up, ready to pull away, but he didn't. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable, but full of something I recognized all too well. The air between us thickened, the silence louder than any confession. I should have moved. I should have said something ordinary, something safe. Instead, I froze, waiting for him to say what neither of us dared to admit. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked softly, eyes searching mine. The question hit harder than it should have. I smiled weakly, pretending to joke. "You're too young to worry about things like that." He looked down, then up again, his expression unreadable. "You don't look lonely," he said quietly. "But sometimes you do." That night, after he went to his room, I sat by the kitchen window with my tea, watching the rain slide down the glass. Every drop echoed the truth I tried to bury: he wasn't wrong. The next morning, when he walked past me in the hallway, his hand brushed against mine again, just for a second. But that second felt like a promise neither of us had spoken yet. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The following week felt different, like the air itself had changed. Every moment we were in the same room carried a weight neither of us could name. I caught myself noticing things I shouldn't, the way he'd roll up his sleeves while fixing something, or how his eyes lingered a second too long when I walked past. But it wasn't just him. I was changing too. I'd grown too aware of his presence, too sensitive to every quiet look, every small act of care. One evening, he came home earlier than usual. I was in the living room, curled up with a blanket, watching a show I wasn't really paying attention to. When I looked up, our eyes met, and stayed there, just a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Where's your dad?" I asked, my voice soft but steady. "Still out of town," he said, stepping closer, his tone casual, but his gaze wasn't. "You're alone again, huh?" There was something in the way he said it, half teasing, half something deeper. I tried to smile it off, but my throat went dry. He sat on the couch beside me, a little too close. The warmth of his arm brushed against mine. Neither of us moved away. The show played on, forgotten, as silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, my phone buzzed. A message from a friend, just harmless small talk, but he leaned in, glancing at my screen. "Who's that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. But I heard it, the quiet note of jealousy that shouldn't have been there. I turned to face him. "You're acting like you care," I teased, a smile tugging at my lips. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking between mine. "Maybe I do," he said quietly. The words hit harder than they should have. The air between us thickened again, that same dangerous silence returning, the kind that felt like it could shatter with one wrong breath. My heart raced, the sound of it loud in my ears. I wanted to move, to end the moment before it became something more, but I didn't. And when he reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face, the world seemed to hold its breath. Whatever line we were standing on, we were dangerously close to crossing it. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. It was late that night when the storm began. Thunder rolled softly in the distance, and the sound of rain tapped against the windows like a heartbeat. The house was quiet, too quiet. His father's flight had been delayed again, leaving the two of us alone for another night that already felt too heavy. I was in the kitchen, making tea to calm my restless thoughts, when the lights flickered. Then, everything went dark. I gasped softly, nearly spilling the cup. "Great," I muttered, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. Before I could find it, his voice came from the hallway, low, steady. "You okay?" And there he was, his silhouette framed by the faint lightning outside. "I think the power's out," I said, forcing a nervous laugh. He stepped closer, holding a small flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark and landing on my face. For a moment, we just stared at each other, our faces glowing softly in the dim light. The rain outside seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of our breathing. "You shouldn't be walking around in the dark," he said, his tone gentle, teasing but concerned. "I'll survive," I whispered, smiling faintly. But my hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from something else entirely. He took another step closer. The space between us felt smaller than it really was. The faint hum of electricity from the storm seemed to pulse through the air, matching the rhythm of my racing heartbeat. When the next flash of lightning lit the room, I saw his eyes, deep, unreadable, but filled with that same emotion we'd both been trying to ignore. He lifted his hands slowly, brushing a raindrop from my shoulder that must have come in from the open window. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was electric. I should have turned away, but instead, I stood there, breathing him in, feeling the storm around us echo the one inside me. And then, as the thunder cracked outside, the flashlight flickered out, plunging us both into darkness again. In that single heartbeat of silence, I felt him move closer, and the world stopped. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The darkness stretched for a few seconds that felt like forever. My heartbeat was loud, almost drowning out the sound of the rain outside. Then, the flashlight flickered back to life, its weak glow catching his face only inches from mine. We both froze, either of us daring to move. The closeness, the silence, the storm, it all felt like something was about to break. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the rain. My throat went dry. "What is it?" He hesitated, searching my eyes like he was trying to find the courage hidden behind my calm expression. "It's been hard, pretending everything's normal." "What do you mean?" I whispered, though part of me already knew. He stepped back slightly, running a hand through his damp hair. "You act like you don't see it, like none of this means anything." The room seemed to shrink around us. The air was heavy with all the unspoken words that had been building between us for weeks. "I do see it," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But what we're feeling, it's wrong." His eyes flickered with hurt, but also relief, like finally hearing the truth was both freeing and painful. "Maybe it is," he said, "but it's real." Before I could respond, the sound of the front door unlocking sliced through the tension like a blade. My heart stopped. His father was home. I stepped back instantly, panic flashing across my face. He turned toward the hallway, jaw tight, eyes wide with the realization of what could happen if we were found like this, in the dark, alone, the air between us thick with emotion. We barely had time to move before his father's footsteps echoed closer. The flashlight beam quivered in his unsteady hand as he whispered, "Don't say anything." The kitchen light flickered back on just as his father appeared, tired from travel, rain dripping from his coat. "What's going on?" he asked casually, setting down his bag. I forced a smile. "Power went out for a bit." He was just helping me find candles. His father nodded, none the wiser, but something in his son's expression caught his attention. A flicker of suspicion. As he left the room, silence fell again. The storm outside had begun to calm, but inside me, everything was spinning. When I turned to face him, he was already watching me, with a look that said everything words couldn't. Guilt. Longing. Fear. I whispered, "This has to stop." He didn't answer. He just gave a small, broken smile before walking away, leaving me alone with the truth I'd been avoiding. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was louder than any storm. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the stairs, the faint hum of the refrigerator, felt like it was waiting for something to break. He barely looked at me during breakfast. His father sat across from us, sipping coffee and talking about his delayed meetings, completely unaware of the tension sitting thick between us. I could feel his son's eyes flicker toward me, only for a second at a time, guilt and longing both written across his face. I tried to steady my breathing, pretending everything was fine. But when his father's phone rang and he stepped out of the kitchen to take the call, the mask cracked. He looked at me, his voice low, firm, trembling slightly. "I can't do this anymore." Acting like I don't feel anything. "Don't," I said quickly, shaking my head. "You'll make this worse for both of us." His jaw clenched. "So that's it? We just pretend? Like last night never happened?" My heart thudded painfully. "We have to. We don't have a choice." He stood, frustration spilling over. "Maybe you can ignore it, but I can't. I meant what I said, I feel something for you. I'm not ashamed of that." The words hung in the air like thunder before it strikes. My chest tightened, part of me wanting to deny it, another part breaking under the weight of the truth. Just then, his father returned, his eyes narrowing at the sight of us, standing too close, tension too visible. "Everything okay here?" he asked, voice sharp, suspicious. I stepped back instantly, forcing a smile. "Just talking about dinner plans," I lied, my pulse racing. He didn't seem convinced. His gaze moved between us, questions forming in his silence. When he left for work a few minutes later, the door closing behind him felt like the world exhaling. I turned to face his son, tears threatening but unshed. "This has to stop," I said softly. "Before it destroys us." He looked at me for a long time, eyes filled with pain. Maybe it already did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The morning light spilled across the counter, golden and harsh, like it was exposing everything we'd been hiding. I reached out, just barely brushing his hand, a silent goodbye that said everything words couldn't. He didn't pull away. But when he finally turned and walked out the door, I knew this time, he wouldn't come back the same. The storm between us had passed, but it left everything changed. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Weeks passed after that stormy night. The house returned to its quiet rhythm, routine meals, small talk, the sound of rain replaced by sunlight through open windows. But beneath the calm, something between us had changed forever. He kept his distance at first, respectful but silent. I could feel the space between us like a wound that hadn't fully healed. Yet, every time our eyes met across the room, that unspoken connection lingered, gentle, real, and no longer dangerous. One late afternoon, I found him in the garden fixing a broken fence. The sunlight glowed on his face, the breeze carrying the faint scent of wet grass. For a moment, I just watched him, steady, thoughtful, older somehow. When he looked up and saw me, the faintest smile touched his lips. "Didn't think you'd come out," he said softly. "I wanted to," I replied, stepping closer. "You've been avoiding me." He chuckled under his breath, setting the tools aside. "I thought it's what you wanted." I hesitated, searching for the right words. I wanted things to calm down. But I never wanted to lose what we had, our understanding, our care for each other. He nodded slowly, eyes sincere. Maybe we both needed time to figure out what this really was. There was no tension this time, no storm in the air, just a quiet warmth between two people who had already been through too much silence. I smiled faintly. "You've grown a lot, you know." "I see it now." He looked down, then met my eyes again. "And you taught me more than you think." The words carried no weight of guilt anymore, only gratitude, respect, and something softer. A shared truth that didn't need to be hidden. A bird fluttered past, landing on the fence post near him, and the simplicity of that moment, the peace after everything, felt like closure. I reached out, brushing a speck of dirt from his sleeve. He didn't move away. There was no need for apologies now. The past had already spoken. We stood there quietly, side by side in the fading light. Not as two people trapped by circumstance, but as two souls who had finally found peace in understanding. He smiled again, this time brighter. "We're okay now, right?" I nodded, my voice soft but certain. "We are." As the sun dipped behind the trees, its golden glow wrapped around us, warm, forgiving, and full of something that finally felt right.